deep dive Liferay DXP. Well, it's not gonna be that deep. I mean, we've a time slot of some 30 minutes, so we can't dive very deep in 30 minutes. However, I want to do basically two things in this session. First of all, to give you a more technical overview of Liferay DXP product, high-level overview on the technical perspective. And second, to present a specific feature called Liferay Forms on a live demo. So let's talk about this technical overview of Liferay DXP. Being a portal or DXP right now, first of all, you have to consider about compatibility. Since Liferay is basically written on Java technology stack, the operation system compatibility is pretty easy to explain. It's basically compatible to all operation systems which can run a specific Java version, which are able to run a specific Java version. I have to admit, our support organization does certify and support particular OS versions for organization efforts. But at the end of the day, you can run Liferay DXP on any OS which is able to run a Java VM on at the specific required Java version. Regarding compatibility to databases, we are basically agnostic to databases. You can run Liferay on actually all common databases like MySQL, MariaDB, Oracle, MS SQL, whatever you actually like. This is realized by a persistence layer which is based on Hibernate, and basically also by the fact that we don't use any database specific features. So not even the referencing is done on database level. All of these things are done on application level. However, also here from support organization, some database versions are explicitly supported and certified, but at the end of the day, we don't care which database you use for your Liferay. Regarding document repositories, you do also have multiple possibilities how to store documents in your Liferay DXP. First of all, of course, you can use a file system. So this would be like having just links in your Liferay database to physical documents in a file system. Of course, you can also store your documents in the database. Well, if it does make sense to store documents or not, in a database or not, you need to consider how big these documents are and how much documents you have. If you have a lot of small documents, you can gain a performance boost by storing documents in the database. If you have very big documents, you would very likely break your database by storing documents in the database. Other possibilities how to store documents in Liferay is basically connecting third-party document systems via CMS, or to use default connectors to systems like Documentum or SharePoint. So if you want to use SharePoint, for example, just for documents, document handling and Office integration and the stuff, you can do that and bring these documents also into Liferay, into a Liferay library by connecting, for example, SharePoint or Documentum into a Liferay library via being a repository of this particular Liferay library. User administration, as I already mentioned in the talk today, basically the user administration and this permission system of Liferay is strictly role-based. Besides that, we have a couple of default connectors to very known systems, very known applications about authorization and authentication. Very common use case will be to connect Liferay to an Active Directory via LDAP. As an example, you can even use a Facebook login or a Google Plus login to authenticate in Liferay. That are all default out-of-the-box features. I'd like to mention a little bit the construction kit of Liferay DXP. Considering all these compatibility things and user administration things to be basically the big P on this DXP, be the portal, the platform. In addition to that, we do deliver out-of-the-box features like plugins in the areas CMS DMS Collaboration, what I already mentioned in my former talk. All these plugins have basically one thing common. They do based on some frameworks, which we do actually also open for you to develop your own applications based on Liferay. So let's take the example. If you want to develop whatever application based on Liferay, having particular permissions for this application, you don't need to reinvent the permission system. You just connect your application to a Liferay permission framework. However, Liferay Forms as a specific feature is pretty new in Liferay DXP. We started Liferay Forms in DXP 7.0 and did develop it further to our current version 7.1. So what are current features of Liferay Forms? It's multi-language support for your forms. It's the possibility to make rules for your forms. Let's take something like that. You have a field email and a field phone. And if the user puts in anything in the field of email, he doesn't need to fill anything through phone. Otherwise, the phone field is required. So such rules can be realized pretty easy. Element sets is a very nice feature of current DXP version. considering that basically all forms you will use in your applications or your sites, pages, will basically have some common fields, like a zip code, like a street, like first name, last name, whatever. It would be pretty annoying to drag and drop all these fields in every new form. For this, we have the so-called element sets, which are basically just templates of sets of fields. A very nice feature is this autosave functionality. Imagine having a form deployed to a mobile app, which is realized by Liferay screens, implementing a form's screenlet. So you have deployed your form on your mobile app, and the user using this mobile app starts to fill this form out. After starting to fill out the fields, his mom calls on his mobile phone, and he has to take this phone, and this phone call takes some 30 minutes. After that, he did forget to finish his form. What happens is that all the data he did already fill are stored in the Liferay in Liferay, and when he logs in on another device at the evening, for example, from his laptop, all his data are available, and he can fill out the form to the end. So let's take a look on how this can be realized in life. Okay, this is a naked vanilla Liferay DXP 7.1. So I actually not customize anything. Right now, I did log in as an administrator. As an administrator, I have actually all rights in Liferay. So let's take a look on this main menu. There are basically 3 areas. This control panel area is this area where you can make settings for on global-wide settings, server-wide settings. This test called area is the user-specific area. So the logged-in user can make changes like changing his name, changing his whatever. He can take a view on the workflow tasks which has been assigned to him. This is basically all stored in this user-specific area. The next area is the site administration. So in the site administration, you can actually do everything related to a particular site. You can customize navigations. You can make new pages. You can work on content. You can upload documents. You can work on forms. So as an example, I want to realize an application form, job application form. So consider having a website. You have a career page, and you do want to have a form on the page for job applications of some customers. I did already prepare some things. Those element sets I did mention. So I have 3 of those element sets, element set address, contact, and documents. Let's take a look on one of those element sets. It's multi-language support. So I do have default language English and available translation German. If I switch to this second language, well, I did prepare this, so I do have all those fields in both languages. So let's start creating a new form. This form is called Job Application 2019. Well, I do add a second language. But actually I do work on the default language to create this form. So my first step is to just drag and drop those element sets. So some of the fields are already in. I did create a first page of my job application form. Let's call it personal data. Next thing I want to do is to add a second page. You can make multiple page forms. So on the second page will be your application. Where I just drag and drop those this next element set. And I create another page, a success page, called thank you. We did receive your application. So I do save this form. So that was pretty quick to create a form with some templates, basically. Let's go into more detailed functionalities of some fields. So what I can do is, for example, to extend those fields I did put by those element sets. So let's just add another field into this form. It will be a select from list. The select from list field will be country. So if you have a select from list field type, you have to to develop some or to create some options for this select field. There are multiple possibilities how to realize that. You can create option opt A, opt B, and so on manually. And you can use a data provider. I did prepare already a countries data provider. So I choose the data provider and the output parameter. Let's save this form again, and I will show you what is meant by these data providers. So this is this prepared data provider. This particular data provider is basically nothing more than a functionality to consume web services, right? So you, in this particular use case, I use the inside Liferay web services, which does output a country list. So let's get back to this job application 2019. Next thing I want to do, I want to know on the second page the basically current job status of my user who wants to apply to my job. I will realize that by an autocomplete field. Current job. Autocomplete. Well, and again, I could use another data provider with a job list, but in this to make it more easy, I will just add 3 possible options. Consultant, manager, and designer. Okay, so let's save it. Next thing I want to show is how to create such a rule. So what I want to realize is if a rule that makes mobile field required if no phone value is put it in. So let's go to rules. If, what did I tell? Phone. It's not empty. To require, oh, is empty. To require mobile. So let's save as rule and save as form. I do publish this form to make it available in my front end. Go to a site. And to make it available on a page, on a particular page, I need to use this form Portlet, select a form, a particular one. Well, I do select this job application 2019. Now I just can start. Well, let's bring another form, language, selector, another Portlet. So I have 2 languages. Default language is English and Deutsch is the second one. So I could actually fill in the data in German, but I won't do that. I will do it in English. So I'm a Mr. David. Proba is also required. Street 1 to example street. Zip 1 2 3 4 5. Zurich. So what I told you about this country list, it's a select field consuming this web service, which does output basically all this available countries. And well, we are in Switzerland. This rule is working. I did make mobile to be required as long as phone is empty. So let's make a value to phone. And you see, well, it's not required anymore. Next step. Okay, my current job is, well, consultant, which is an autocomplete field. So I did start my typing in. I do upload some documents which I already prepared. The other ones are not required. Submit the field, submit the value, the form, and got my success page as a result. So far about creating forms and making rules on the forms. What happens next is, or what can happen next is basically that you start workflows or processes based on these forms. In this context, Liferay provides an own workflow engine, which is called Kaleo. The reason for having our own workflow engine is to have a small one, easy to handle one within Liferay to make things like job application workflows or approval workflows for web contents pretty easy to manage. In Liferay DXP, there is also this Kaleo designer, which makes it possible to well, model your workflows. In Kaleo workflow engine, you have basically 8 possible nodes. What I want to mention about workflows in Liferay in general is they are content driven. So it's not possible to just push a button and then suddenly a workflow starts. All workflows in Liferay are content driven. So something needs to happen on any asset in Liferay. You can upload a document, you can update a document, a web content article, whatever. This kind of behavior triggers workflows in Liferay. So what are the possible nodes in in Kaleo? I guess start and end are pretty obvious. The next node is, well, the task node, which is the most common one. In this task node, a user interactivity will be triggered or will be necessary. So let's take a look on this very, very simple workflow, which triggers a review action. In this task node, you have multiple things you can realize. First of all, you need to assign a task to either a particular user, a role type, or to anybody or a group of members. Second, if you assign workflows to somebody, you need to inform them that they got assigned to a workflow task. Therefore, you have a possibility to send notifications. So this is like what a notification template would look like. Besides that, if you want to use Kaleo inside of Liferay, but trigger also more complex processes in your backend systems, no problem. You can just trigger APIs, external APIs. You can make a call on this action field. The default language here is a Groovy script language, and there you can just trigger API calls. So let's take a further look on additional nodes. The state node would be if a task is finished, a workflow gets a state. I mean, in this example, it's very easy. But if you have maybe a more complex workflow, it may be necessary to show your users in which state of the workflow it is actually. So therefore, you can define such states. Those lines are basically the possible actions. So if a user which has been assigned to a workflow, which got assigned a workflow, is in this task node, he has the possibility to either approve or reject. So that's how to make the possible actions realized in Kaleo. Okay, the next possible node is condition. It's basically an if-else clause. So, example, if metadata field of my web content is filled in with the value X, Y, W, go this way of the workflow, otherwise go other way. Fork. Considering maybe a use case of vacation application. You have to apply for vacation to your manager, and HR department needs to approve this. You can meet this requirement by either modeling a workflow which does both actions sequentially, or you can do this in parallel. If you do want things realized in parallel in a workflow, you need to fork this workflow. Well, and if you have a fork, you need somewhere maybe a join to go further in the workflow. So in this context, there are two possible joins, the join and the join XOR. The join says, well, both paths of the workflow need to be finished before the workflow goes to the next step. For the join XOR, it's sufficient if one of those both paths is finished. So what I can do now is to just send a notification to, well, the administrator. Now to the role site administrator save. I do update this. And decoded forms. Let's take a look on this. Settings. Select the workflow. Save it. I go to members, add memberships. Well, assign site roles. Great. So what happens now if I go to fill in this again? Again, Zurich. Again, Switzerland. It will be mobile phone now, email. Go to the next step. I'm still consultant. Again, some documents to upload in this form. Well, now I can submit for publication, which means this kind of workflow would start. If I push the button, me and myself get the notification because I'm not only the portal administrator, I did assign the site administrator role also to myself. So I get the notification that somebody did apply to my job opportunity. Well, and now the next step would be to meet your concrete requirements, what to do with the data which users did fill out. So far, I'm actually done for the live demo part and for this part of technical overview of Liferay DXP and live demo of Liferay Forms. Do you have so far any questions?
So for the forms,
Yes.
you've created the form.
Yes.
My question is, how can you access the underlying data? In particular, can you use the service layer to access the underlying data? So let's say you've got 100 candidates that submitted their job applications, and you want to list all the candidatures and sort based off the or group or sort by the, let's say, the current role.
Well, current status is in Liferay DXP 7.1 that you can, first of all, just take a look on the view entries. I did apply 2 times, so now I do have this this list of entries. Second, you can catch the data on API level. What currently is not possible out of the box is to edit the data, but this is a feature which will be realized in next version 7.2.
And to access using API, can you do that using the service layer, or what kind of API you can use to access the data? So if I want to like pull the data from the database directly or from the service layer, is it possible?
Sure.
Maybe we can discuss later on that, because I'm interested in.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sorry. So yes, we have a storage adapter API. So using this storage adapter API, all your data, it doesn't even need to be stored in Liferay. You can direct it to other external services using Liferay as your data provider. Okay. So we have a documentation in help.liferay.com orienting customers on how to do it. So if you want more details, I can provide a direct link to for you to test it. All right. Yeah.
Any more questions?
Excuse me.
Can we start?
Okay.
Oh, okay.
So, David, thank you very much for the nice presentation. I have a question regarding the rules functionalities.
Yes.
So you have shown how you can oblige someone to put some data in country or telephone number or something like that. If I create, for instance, an order request, like a formula, I order a new laptop, and I say I can choose, like you did with the countries, I can choose the laptops that are standard for the company. There is a price behind it. It's coming down upstairs in front of the formula automatically, I suppose. And then there is a price behind it, a price tag. That says, it's a rule, that says it's under 1,000 franc, it's okay, I can order it. If it's above, I should have the validation from, I don't know, the IT director or something like that. Is this supported? And how far do you go with the rules? This means...
Well, actually, this particular use case would not couldn't be realized by this default rules which are implemented. But don't worry, all those rules are based on a rules API, so you can extend those rules by a custom rule which does fully meet your requirement, implementing all the business logic you need to meet this requirement.
Okay, so you mean I can create my own rule?
Yes.
And I can implement it or integrate it into the formula? Okay, that's okay. Is there any way to control if the rules are correct and totally no gap is in the rule? For instance, I come back with my example of computer. I ask for a computer that's under 1,000 franc is okay, I can order it. If I order a computer that's 1,200, I have to validate it at another level. But between the two, there is no rule at the moment. If it's 1,100, for instance,
Well,
you know, it's a gap. It's a gap somewhere. Is there any way to control the rules are correct and end to end?
Well, what you described is basically a gap in the business logic.
No, in the rules engine.
No, what I did actually understand is if you have a if-else clause with or a switch clause. One case is over 1,000. Second clause is under 700, whatever, and there is a gap between. That would be pretty much a third switch clause. But this is done in the business logic of the particular rule, which you do develop via rules API.
Okay. Doesn't answer the question, but that's okay. That's fine, because rules can be very much more complicated, you know. It's but that's okay. That's okay.
What I would suggest, maybe we can have later on a deeper discussion on this.
So what I would like, Sergey, is to understand exactly if your need is in relation to auditing the rules to make sure that the rules are compliant with the business logic that you're building. And if that, I would like to understand what are the requirements that you think about it, what are the needs, because this is interesting. I would like to further down discuss, because we don't have any auditing mechanism right now in rules out of the box. But you can build a set of mechanisms in Liferay to check if the rules are compliant with the logic that you are developing over some simple tests to just make sure that your form is responding to the specific needs. Okay? All right.
Well, by the way, meet Charles. He's the product manager of Liferay Forms.
Thank you. Well, before I start my question, one answer would probably be also in the workflow you have an audit trail of all the transitions, when has a state reached and so. So that's maybe helpful for you as well. My question would be,
Yes.
Do you have a possibility to trigger a virus scanner for file uploads, which is particularly needed for this job application? You know what I mean?
So you need.
So when you upload the file, you want to have it virus scanned, especially PDFs and all these strange formats.
Well, this can be realized, but actually not on the. It's not a feature of Liferay Forms. It's exactly.
Sorry to interrupt you again.
You're very welcome.
Okay, so all the files that you upload through Forms, they go to the Documents and Media API through it. So if Documents and Media, you have support in there for from an image, interpret that and give you the results of that file in terms of scanning it and give you just the types in that document, it is possible to do. But it needs to be done on the Documents and Media side. Forms just captures the file and just sends it. But going down into your need, do you need to display that content while the user is uploading the file? I would like to explore more on.
Well, I think it would be a natural requirement. It would be a natural requirement when you expose this job application form to the internet that you want to virus scan your uploads in order to prevent dangerous PDFs or Word files before or in a transition phase before you really store it or continue the workflow. So, I mean, you cannot build a virus engine on your own, right? So you want to have an external tool or library installed on the server, and you need to externally trigger that via operating system or whatever.
Well,
API.
there are multiple approaches to do that, but actually not on the feature of Liferay Forms, but on the document library feature. So, for example, a pretty easy thing you can do is to exclude executable files, for example. That's
Yes, exactly.
pretty easy.